The untold story of the biggest heist in United Bank, California. The United California Bank in Laguna Niguel, California, witnessed the biggest burglary in March 1972, when the safe deposit vault at the bank was robbed by a group of elite criminals who stole $8 million of cash and other valuables. Adjusting this to inflation today, the robbers held an approximate value of around $66 million worth of money. This was their biggest project under the leadership of Amil Dinsio, and the heist was marked as the biggest bank robbery until 1972. But what happened to the heist members, the bank, and the deposits of the public is a subject of great attention even today. This is Robbers Insights, and today we will dive into a detailed account of everything that happened that day at the United California Bank. It was the morning of Monday, March 27, 1972. The employees prepared to open for business, but when the bank manager tried to open the vault, he was unable to do so. At the time, his suspicion did not go towards anything. Calling for help, he continued his attempt. The technician from the vault manufacturing department arrived 20 minutes later to solve the issue. He began to check the door's locking system and worked for hours to figure out what was wrong. The combination was right, the tumblers were in place, but strangely the door failed to open. The expert tried to look for another way to open the vault and climbed into the rafters above it. There he was stunned to find a hole that cut into the roof, followed by another gaping hole that led to the vault. The technician wasted no time and informed the bank manager. Shocked by the technician's statement, the manager immediately called the police and FBI at the bank. FBI Special Agent Jim Conway arrived at the scene and climbed onto the raft to check the holes. To Conway's surprise, he found a pile of rubble about 6 feet tall that expanded out. Once the technician got inside the vault, he discovered a screwdriver jammed into the lock's gears. Agent Conway, at the time, suspected that the thieves attempted to delay the discovery of the burglary. Conway stated in a documentary that unlike any other crime scene, it was not as simple to walk in and determine the leads. The place was an incredible mess, filled with rings, watches, and other valuable items, and each thing had to be looked at individually. The second FBI agent, Frank Cali, arrived at the bank's vault and began to sort things through the chaos. The difficult task of determining how the burglars managed to enter the unbreakable vault started, and the investigators found pieces of burlap and dark soil mixed with cement rubble. On the outside portion of the vault, they found the audible auto alarm to be disabled. Similarly, a ladder was found in the grass outside. Each discovery started to connect the dots. The investigators now had their entire focus on determining their entry inside the vault. The clues and discoveries came swiftly, yet each of them felt completely detached from the other. This led the investigators to look for the final solution, so they began from their first step and developed a series of actions. The FBI agents looked at each clue individually. The alarm was disabled by injecting it with liquid styrofoam. It hardened within seconds and froze the clapper in place, which rendered the alarm useless. The second piece of evidence was the ladder found. Once the alarm was disabled, their entry was now easier. On the rooftop, the agents found out the tape, which indicated how the electricity connection was cut out. However, upon forensic reports, the tape had no fingerprints, suggesting that the burglars wore gloves. But later in the research, the investigators retracted the previous statement and realized something mind-blowing. The tape was used for using electricity to redirect the electric wires so they could drill into the roof and get inside the vault. This conclusion explained how they managed to hole the roof above the vault. Once they drilled the holes, they were met by another interior silent alarm system. Yet, the burglars managed to bypass this. When they attached the wires for drilling into the roof, they clipped the wires of the alarm and left it disabled. This led them to the final issue of getting inside the vault, probably the most difficult one. A 16-inch of steel reinforced with concrete stood between the contents of the vault and the burglars. The experts claimed that the only way through was to conduct an intensely heavy blast that destroyed the steel and concrete, but also put the burglars' own life into danger. The burglars were smart enough. They drilled into the cement and then inserted dynamite to blast it. This blast required precision to blow through the cement but to cause no harm to the contents of the vault and avoid any self-injury to burglars. The burglars put the explosives into the bags. This muffled the sound of the blast, thus avoiding any attention to this. At the same time, it would direct the charge into the vault and not themselves. As the investigators dug further into the matter, they discovered burn marks on the steel rebar that reinforced the cement, concluding that the blast was inefficient in blowing up the steel. Therefore, a backup plan for carrying an acetylene torch came in handy for the burglars. As they looked at each step from disabling the alarm to conducting explosions, they made an approximate idea of their entry to the vault. The attention was now redirected towards the fundamental issue that captivated the bank manager, the employees, the FBI, and later even the public. How much did the burglars take, and how much did the bank lose? The agents turned their focus on assessing the total loss. The bank staff reported an approximate $50,000 of missing cash. The thieves, however, were less interested in the cash. They spent considerable time inside the vault to break into 458 safe deposit boxes of valuable items. The agents found pinpoint instrument marks on the deposit boxes. The burglars, it seemed, had opened each deposit box individually. The burglars took what looked expensive and left behind everything else. Half of the mess the officers found initially was filled with ashes of dead people, property documents, and paper checks. What amazed the officers was the movement of the burglars. They went in and out of the bank without being seen. One possible explanation was the weekend. Banks mostly remained closed on weekends, and the city remained quiet. The burglars took full advantage of this fact. To complicate the issue even further, the burglars, despite spending a hefty amount of time stealing the deposits, left no fingerprints at all. They managed to find a brown glove and a broken bit of drilling machine. But tracing their fingerprints on them was impossible, considering the technological innovation at the time. The debris was taken into custody by agents and deputies for further examination at the crime lab. The agents could not comprehend the case any further. With no eyewitnesses of the event and no potential evidence of the robbery, they faced an incredibly tough time at duty to identify and locate the group of highly skilled criminals who, beyond the heist, were able to conduct explosives and change the electric system. In the hopes of any progress, the investigators divided themselves into two halves. The first one was in charge of developing an approximate idea of stolen items, and the second group would identify and locate the thieves. The first group now had to carefully catalog and sort each item into the vault, followed by an interview with every box holder. The staggering figure of 458 interviews and the hectic task of counting for each item did draw some conclusions about what was missing. This included jewelry, rare gold coins, and bear bonds. As the investigators created a list of stolen goods, they felt that the stolen cash of around $50,000 was only a drop in comparison to stolen valuables. The approximate value of missing items had now reached over $8 million. This led to this heist being the largest bank burglary in the entire history of the U.S. With minimal evidence and no leads, the investigators decided to adapt and think like bandits to develop any insights that could potentially lead to a breakthrough. Upon investigation, the agents felt that oxygen was required to burn the rebar, so they canvassed every hospital and pharmacy in the district. Yet after checking every oxygen supplier in the area around, they could not get their hands on the burglars. Similarly, the drill used for getting inside the vault was the second key element required. Thus, dozens of records were checked, yet no suspicious purchases or rentals were found. The burglars were successful in creating a mastermind plan, one that left almost no traces for investigators to identify anything. The Los Angeles division had not seen anything like this before. The bank robberies previously recorded were often low effort with significantly lower amounts stolen. This was rather huge. The investigators now suspected that the group of highly trained burglars had come from somewhere else. The FBI checked criminal records throughout the U.S. that had any similar incidents to recognize the burglars or a pattern. The first success came for the FBI. They received the news from a Cleveland, Ohio field officer where agents had been investigating similar heists. In fact, 13 such incidents. At the time, Special Agent Buddy Nix explained about the bank robberies that included outside alarms being disabled through styrofoam, bypassing alarm systems, using explosions to get through, and even where the robbers left no fingerprints. The officers suspected these burglary crews to be involved in the Los Angeles heist of the similarity in these cases. They were known as the Youngstown crew that had an association of criminals of organized crime. From the beginning of the investigation, it was apparent that such a robbery was not conducted by small crooks or ordinary thieves. They were highly trained professionals who could perform multiple tasks within a short period. The Youngstown crew at the time were involved in numerous other activities that breached the state's law. They ran illegal gambling businesses, were involved in interstate transportation of stolen property, and tracked trailer thefts. The investigation team at the Cleveland, Ohio field office identified nearly 100 men that could potentially be a part of this burglary. The next task was to narrow down the list of men who were part of the United Bank heist. The officers collected information from intelligence agencies for each individual. The agents at the Ohio Cleveland office sent the men's names, mugshots, and necessary information to the FBI team in Los Angeles. Since the Youngstown came from outside Los Angeles, the agents began to check for the airline passenger lists, the railway networks, people on platforms, and even the main highways if any suspicious car or truck had entered California in recent days. At the time in 1972, computers weren't very popular and the internet had yet to be invented, so the process was not only hectic, but far less efficient. The exhaustive research finally led to some conclusions. The narrowed-down list now had the names of 5 men from Youngstown's list who had boarded a recent flight to Los Angeles. The names of these 5 individuals were Harry Barber, Charles Mulligan, Charles Brockles, Amil Dinsio, and Philip Christopher. These men had boarded a flight to California 9 days before the burglary took place. A 6th name, James Dinsio, was added, who had arrived on a different flight, a day before these men to California. Finally, the agents were able to identify the men involved. The next task was to gather information. The agents collected detailed accounts from the intelligence departments for the 6 men. Each member had a long criminal record for home robberies and small business burglaries, and some even spent jail time. Among the crew members, Amil Dinsio was seen as the mastermind behind the plan, and leader of the crew. He planned the jobs and handpicked the team to pull them off. The other member, Charles Brockles, was an explosives and electronics expert well-versed in bank alarms. Philip Christopher was a lookout for the team members while they conducted the heist. The rest of the gang members were found to be relatives of the leader. They were assumed to do the grunt work for the heist. James was Amil's elder brother, Mulligan was his brother-in-law, and Amal's nephew was Harry Barber. Each member of the team was a professional criminal, well-trained in organized crime. The officers in Ohio had linked them with numerous bank robbers, but they were never directly connected to any such incident. Even in the robbery in Los Angeles, the officers were unable to connect any direct link. Their only evidence was their presence in the town during the heist. Agents began the difficult job of tracking their movements, starting from the airport. The investigation included interviews with umpteen amounts of cab drivers who could potentially provide any details of the 6 members. During the investigation process, one cab driver recalled taking 5 people to a home in a nearby community towards a Southgate house. The cab driver claimed to remember the members for 2 reasons. The first was the excellent $100 tip, while the second reason he recalled was each member looking tough and mean, which created an aura of fear during his ride. The cab driver provided the address, but the investigation officers were reluctant to go there. Their fear developed from the idea that if burglars suspected any ongoing investigation, they would leave town immediately, never to be found again. At this point, Special Agent Jim Conway took the chance. This was their only lead that could get their hands on the burglars, and he could not let it slip out of his hands. The consensus developed at the investigation office to search the house and interview the family. The intelligence provided information that the house belonged to the Barber family. Upon reaching the house, Ronald Barber, the brother of Harry Barber, agreed to an interview with the FBI team but was evasive about it. Since the investigating officers lacked a warrant at the time, Ronald had the upper hand for not cooperating with them. He claimed that the 6 men never came to his house at all. The agents were once again empty-handed, as they were yet to find any direct evidence of the burglary. The investigating team felt the house was too small to accommodate around 6 men. They believed that some men probably stayed somewhere else, and the investigation continued again. Their duty now was to search every hotel around and look for any leads, beginning from the ones near the bank. The task was extremely tedious, but the lack of direct evidence had left no other option. One agent felt that Heist members probably did not stay at the best hotels, so he searched for low-standard rental places. At one particular truck stop hotel, he found out that Amil Dinsio and his brother-in-law Charles Mulligan had rented a home during the time of the heist. Weeks had passed since the biggest robbery in U.S. bank history. The FBI agents had finally narrowed down their investigation to 6 suspects. They had successfully identified the motel, where at least 2 members of the theft had stayed down during the day the heist occurred. The FBI Special Agent Paul Chamberlain was convinced that these 6 men committed the heist, but had no direct evidence to prove his case. The phone record of the motel was checked, and they found a series of calls to a local man named Earl Dawson. When the intelligence agencies collected background information on Earl Dawson, they were surprised to know his previous services in the U.S. military. Dawson had received training as a member of the Marine Force, where he had learned to use ammunition and explosives. A second connection was his affiliation to Youngstown, Ohio, which led to more suspicions of his involvement in the burglary. The agents decided to meet Dawson at his house and convinced him to cooperate. Dawson initially refused to identify the pictures of the 6 members, but eventually decided to cooperate with the FBI members. He admitted his connection with 3 members, Amil Dinsio, his brother James, and his childhood friend Mulligan. He recalled that the day before the heist, Mulligan came to meet him with the other suspects and paid him about $100 for leaving the room empty to discuss their plan. This made little connection to the heist, but what Dawson offered to the agents then was of significant importance. He told the FBI members that Mulligan parked his car in his garage upon his arrival, and it was still parked there. This led to a huge breakthrough in the investigation and could potentially provide a large amount of evidence for the investigation. Before the investigators could search the car down, the phone rang at Dawson's house. As he picked up the call, he indicated the officers by whispering Mulligan's name. The officer asked for his permission to eavesdrop, to which he signaled a second phone connected in his bedroom. The officer heard Mulligan asking about any FBI members searching his home. He told Dawson that he was aware of the FBI's investigation. He seemed worried about it and said that he was returning to Los Angeles tonight and was going to take the car. The FBI interrupted Dawson before he replied and wrote on a chit to call Mulligan at a public place, to which Dawson invited him to his favorite bar, Walnut Room. Mulligan agreed. Once the call was finished, the agents began to search the car. Through the window, they found a pair of gloves that had a striking similarity to the ones found in the vault. They also found debris, which was similar to the one found at the crime scene. The correlation was very positive, yet the agents lacked a search warrant for the car. The officers immediately set up a warrant for Mulligan's arrest and surveillance at the Walnut Room. The agents positioned themselves inside the bar, and a few members waited outside. Each member not only had to remain alert, but also look natural and avoid any suspicion. 3 hours later, Mulligan arrived. Dawson initiated the conversation by talking about their childhood and eventually molded the conversation into the heist. Agent sitting across the table could not hear it clearly and headed to the restroom, where Dawson followed him. He informed the agent that Mulligan was anxious about his car and wanted to leave early. The agent advised him to leave but not to sit in the car with him at any cost. What the agent did not tell Dawson was that FBI agents were sitting in the parking lot to arrest Mulligan. As the two walked across towards his garage, the agents arrested Mulligan, and along with it Dawson, for his safety. Mulligan did not resist at the time of arrest, but during his interrogation, he refused to answer any question. The officers now had a search warrant for the car, and as they looked into it, they found numerous items that could potentially be used for the Laguna Niguel investigation. Every single item was immediately shipped to the FBI in Washington, D.C., for technicians and forensic experts to create further leads into the case. The result, however, had to take a few days before any further discovery. Hence, the field experts continued their investigation to catch any other member of the heist. They successfully managed to find another house that was rented to two suspicious people, Harry and Ronald Barber. The manager explained the initial verbal agreement of 3 months, but the renters left just after 3 days. When the officer cross-checked the dates of their entry and exit from the apartment, they arrived 3 days before the heist and ended on the day of the burglary. The initial search in the apartment led to disappointment and failure. The heist members had left no evidence for investigators to ponder upon. They had cleaned the apartment and no traces of fingerprints were recorded. The research, however, led to a breakthrough. The dishwasher was filled with dirty crockery, and the plates had multiple fingerprints which could now identify the members. At the FBI lab, they were successful in discovering the fingerprints and matched them with the ones found on Mulligan's car. At least 5 of the 7 suspects were now directly linked to this evidence. Another breakthrough in the investigation came with direct evidence at the FBI lab when tool mark experts at the lab found fingerprints on damaged safety deposits at the bank. Those fingerprints matched with the ones on the snout-nosed hammer found in Mulligan's car. The investigation now gained momentum, and with each discovery, the case was getting close to the identification and potential arrest of the heist organizers. The investigators only had Dawson as the direct link and evidence for the heist members, and his safety was their prior concern. They advised him to limit his exposure outside and stay connected with the agents. Dawson began to receive death threats on the calls and was being advised not to cooperate further with the FBI. The caller insisted on meeting him and settling the issues. The FBI suspected it to have a more sinister motive, probably to eliminate Dawson at any opportunity, and decided to take advantage of it. The agents instructed Dawson to arrange a meeting once again at his favorite bar and convey the message that the FBI is actively looking for the Youngstown crew members who participated in the heist. The hitman arrived just in time and switched his bear for heavier drinks. Dawson again followed an agent to the restroom and informed him about his fear. He also told the agent that the hitman wanted to meet him outside. The agent advised Dawson to wait in the restroom, confronted the hitmen, and asked them to stay away from Dawson. The hitmen left the bar with a clear instruction of strict surveillance by the FBI. The FBI kept a strict eye on them until records showed they left California through an airplane. At that point, the FBI decided to put Dawson into their witness protection program. On the other hand, the investigators secured search warrants for the burglars' last known addresses. They continued their investigation and search, where they found a $20 bill as direct evidence of the heist. The serial number of the bill matched with that of the stolen cash from the bank. The FBI agent Buddy Nix from Ohio, Cleveland, informed the FBI agents in Southern California that Youngstown heists were known to bury their cash until it was safe enough to launder it. The agent had informants who gave location hints of the burial place. They dug out the adjacent land of Amil Dinsio. Despite initial failure for any link, almost after a week, they hit the jackpot and found thousands of dollars of cash, bonds, and jewelry, which they began to track back to the Laguna Niguel heist. A neighbor of the gang leader called the police. He reported finding a cooler near his yard which had approximately $100,000. Investigators matched the serial numbers on the notes and recovered the fingerprints of Amil Dinsio from the cooler. As more direct evidence was gathered, the officers began to search directly and arrested the remaining members. The first hit was at Ronald Barber's house, but the only person they managed to get at the time was his mother. The brothers had disappeared. The second hit was at Amil Dinsio's home in Ohio. To their surprise, he didn't run away. and not even hesitated at the arrest. The officers believed it was rather his arrogant behavior of believing in not getting caught. At the time of arrest, he carried around $537 in cash that matched the serial numbers from those at the heist. The officers were surprised at the crew members. They were relatively easier to catch. Within days, they arrested his brother James at the airport, who was carrying a bag filled with cash that matched serial numbers with those that were stolen at Laguna Niguel. The officers swiftly made the fourth arrest of Christopher at his apartment and recovered $32,000 worth of cash. They also matched the serial numbers with the stolen ones. The three members, however, refused to cooperate with the officers and maintained their innocence. 2 months later, the agents confronted Charles Brockles, the alarm expert in the gang. They threatened him with decades of prison punishment for not cooperating and offered to drop all charges if he located the remaining members of the crew. The police also offered to place him in the witness protection program if he confessed to the crime, and he decided to agree. Up till now, 5 of the 7 members of the burglary had been arrested, but the Barber brothers remained hidden. They were listed on charges of burglary, conspiracy, and larceny of a federally insured bank. Dinsio, during his prison time, made a crucial mistake. He discussed his heist with an inmate and asked for his help. This subsequently became his confession. In October 1972, the trials officially began. The 5 members caught were convicted for their $8 million heist. They were sentenced to jail, ranging from 15 to 20 years. The case, however, was not over yet. The 2 members of the heist were at large. After a few months, the FBI got intel about the brothers reaching an apartment. As they knocked on the door, Ronald Barber answered and was immediately arrested. He was presented before a jury, convicted, and charged with 15 years of prison time. But he refused to confess his brother's location. For the coming 8 years, the FBI had no clue of Harry's whereabouts. However, on a strange day at the FBI's office, a woman arrived and explained to the FBI members of her friend's boyfriend. She claimed that he told her friend of previously committing a famous robbery and remembered his name as Harry Barber. According to her statement, Harry Barber worked as a maintenance worker at a local camp to lead a normal life. The FBI arrested him at his local camp, and he was convicted with 20 years of prison time. With Harry's arrest, the FBI finally closed the biggest bank robbery case in U.S. history. The 7 members, under the leadership of Amil Dinsio, had committed 13 bank burglaries with an approximate value of $30 million worth of cash and valuables stolen. With these men now spending time in prison, the FBI agents from Cleveland, Ohio to California were able to overtake one of the most sophisticated and highly trained professionals. This was the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And until next time, stay curious.